My name is Roger Buck, and I'm talking to you today from Ireland, and I'm going to be talking about a tragedy of immense proportions, unthinkable proportions, that has happened on this island very recently. I'm talking about the May the 25th, 2018 referendum in which the yes vote will pave the way for abortion on demand in Ireland. And friends, I've been really struggling to find my voice to speak about this. That referendum was 4 weeks ago now, and it's been, at first, it was just almost impossible for me to talk. I can really say that no political event in my lifetime has ever disturbed me as deeply as this, and I'm still very, very much feeling it all kind of ripple through me. I think, this was made in full consciousness that 1 in 5 English babies are aborted. We had in Ireland signs all over the place saying 1 in 5 English babies are aborted. It's true. In America, the proportion is more like 1 in 4. And Ireland would seem to be headed down that same horrific slippery slope. I find myself thinking of, you know, presidential candidates in America like, Bernie Sanders or indeed Hillary Clinton, whose comments can certainly be interpreted to mean that they were supporting late-term abortion, 36 weeks, right up to birth. There are slippery slopes here to completely horrifying. Another slippery slope I find myself thinking about is what's led to child euthanasia in Belgium. Starting with ordinary euthanasia, which, if you have a purely materialistic viewpoint, that is, you really don't believe there's a soul, or if you're maybe more agnostic and you're open to the idea of a soul, but that's where, you're going to place your bets, or you're going to put your money, or maybe I should say put your dagger, it leads down that slippery slope to something as horrifying as child euthanasia in Belgium. And friends, I'm going to maybe come across to many of you, some of you, as pretty dark. Maybe I'll even seem depressing today. I warn you. I don't really have very much that's cheery to say at this point. In fact, the cheeriest thing I might say, but the only cheery thing I'm going to say, and it's not cheery at all, is that what I think we've seen in Ireland today is something like a collective pathology triumphing. And in the course of history, we've seen many collective pathologies triumphing. But you know what? They always lose. Sometimes they lose pretty quickly. In Nazi Germany, for something like 12 brief years, you had the collective pathology of National Socialism triumphing. It took over a vast portion of the German population. But it ended. It ended in the crushing defeat of Hitler in World War II. And after that, I think Germans have shown a very healthy repentance, penance, for what happened in those 12 years of madness. You have madness of Stalinism, communism in Russia. It came to an end. We have another kind of pathology here today, and I am confident that it will come to an end at some point in the future. I don't know when it's going to happen, but at some point there will be massive penance on a massive scale for what's just happened in Ireland. But really, that's about the only cheery thing I have to say. I'd say something. As I've been listening to some of the Irish commentary, from the no side, from the defeated Catholics and also defeated Protestants. Sometimes I've occasionally heard people put something, well, not exactly a positive spin on it, but they've tried to sort of end what they've said on a positive note. And I really can't do that here. I understand that despair is a sin. And I know that people who are trying to sort of end on a positive note don't want to give in to the sin of despair. But I think we need to be realistic. I'm going to be dark here. I'm going to be maybe very dark. I warn you. But I don't think I'm depressed. You know, what depression means, we need to distinguish here between a true despair. A true despair means that you have no creative fire left. You have no hope. If I had no hope, I wouldn't be doing these videos. I wouldn't be writing my books. I have fire by the grace of God, by the grace of the sacraments of the church, because I think that's really where my greatest fire comes from, what I receive in Holy Communion. I have fire, but doesn't mean that I don't feel some very dark things, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Because what are we talking about today? Yeah, I think that we're on a slippery slope that's going to head us towards things like you have in England and America, and maybe further into the future with people, you know, the kinds of things that people like Sanders and Clinton seem to be proposing. But even if it's not that bad, maybe it won't be 1 in 5, maybe it'll be 1 in 10, 1 in 12, 1 in 20, for all I know. I don't think the long-term outlook is very good, though. But even if it is a mere 1 in 12, when you really take in what that means, mere 1 in 12, I mean, it's ridiculous. When you really take that in, what that means. You know, the children dying in abortions in at least some of the operations, a certain portion there are really very, very cruel and barbaric things there. There's just human potential snuffed out. Only the good Lord knows what this means on a metaphysical level to the soul of the child. And, you know, there's the utterly scarring pain that happens to the mother. You know, I'm well aware that in the conscious world, in the conscious world of consciousness, there may be many women who say that they've had an abortion, didn't bother them a bit. But the underlying reality is different. You can have incredible pain in the unconscious. So to take another analogy, something like morphine, the cancer patient has morphine to kill the pain. It does, and in the conscious world, the pain is killed. In the unconscious, pain is still there. The person is screaming in pain. And really, I think that's going to be the fate of a lot of young Irish women. And moreover, there's something else. You know, this isn't just a defeat for Ireland. It's a defeat for the pro-life movement worldwide. It will certainly have repercussions in the north of Ireland. And also, you know, another factor here, it's the destruction. You know, many of us in Ireland feel we're seeing the final destruction of a culture that was different from other cultures, that was different from other cultures in the West, that protected life. We're witnessing the final destruction of that culture, and that's a very serious issue. But anyway, let's just get down some of the basic things, you know, especially for the benefit of people around the planet that may not know. Eamon de Valera, many ways the founding father of Ireland, founded the Irish Constitution in 1937. And some people might think that what's happened has to do with that. But no. Back in 1937, it was unthinkable. It probably, you know, never even crossed people's minds in a million years. No, this was only a popular initiative much, much later in Ireland, in 1983, where, you know, Irish people saw the direction that was taking place, you know, in other countries like England, America, you know, European countries, and they realized that the Constitution needed to have something in it to protect life. Otherwise, you know, Parliament might just go ahead and vote, you know, in some future circumstance for abortion. Obviously, they were right to be concerned. That referendum to enshrine the right to life in the Constitution, that's what had to be got rid of here in 2018, because Parliament's hands were tied. They could not you know, allow abortion in on a large scale while that constitutional amendment, the 8th Amendment, was there. And now I'd like to show you a little diagram I've done, which points to the massive change in Ireland in just the last 35 years. Because in 1983, The Eighth Amendment was approved in a landslide referendum with 2/3 of the vote. But today, in 2018, we see the mirror image of that society, a 2/3 landslide for killing babies instead. And so there's been an enormous societal transformation in the course of only 3 decades or so, as well as an enormous tragedy and an enormous moral monstrosity. And friends, I'm going to say a lot today that some people will find politically incorrect. And I make no apology for that, because I consider political correctness as a form of creeping fascism. And one of the politically incorrect things that I'm going to start by saying is that I know for myself and for many, many people on this island, there's a feeling that the real Ireland has been destroyed. And yeah, those who are into political correctness will say, how dare you say something like this? How dare you suggest that the real Ireland has been replaced by a fake Ireland, an artificial Ireland, a materialistic Ireland? But when I look at those things that I just had up on the screen, the 1983 referendum, this is what I think. The overwhelming numbers who in 1983 made the pro-life choice to enshrine it in the Constitution. And the numbers are even higher than that suggests, because even of the 1/3 of the people that voted no back then, I dare to say that very few of them were voting for abortion on demand. They just felt it shouldn't be a constitutional amendment. That, to my mind, represents the real Ireland. It's an Ireland that has grown organically over centuries and centuries of tradition. It's a natural Ireland that has always deeply valued Christianity. And to my mind, it's been replaced by another Ireland. We could call it a globalized Ireland, we could call it global Ireland. And that Ireland, I'm going to be really suggesting in this video, is not the result of natural organic processes. It's something that has a lot to do with an imported alien ideology. It has a lot to do with cultural imperialism. It has a lot to do with indoctrination. We face, as far as I can see, in the modern media, the most powerful means of indoctrination ever invented by humanity. And I don't think that many of us are really taking that very seriously at all. So we're going to develop those themes as we continue. But I want to say that in speaking about a real Ireland versus a fake Ireland, that I also face other strikes against me. People who will say, well, how dare you say this? Because of a couple of other factors, and I think we better get them out of the way. First, I'm not Irish. I'm actually American by birth, although my parents were English. I have both American citizenship and British citizenship. Sometimes I say that I'm quintessentially Anglo-American. And I'm going to stress that because it's actually relevant to things that I'm going to say later in this video about the Anglo-American establishment. But there's another strike against me. Because right now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm speaking to you from Ireland. However, from another perspective, I'm actually in what's called Northern Ireland right now, in one of the 6 counties that's being governed, as part of the United Kingdom. Now, I have lived in the Irish Republic down south in the past, and I may well return there in the future, but at the moment, I'm up here in the north. And so, yeah, I couldn't even vote in this referendum, so there might be some people who say I'm not really fit to comment. But there's a couple of things I'd like to say to that. First, Ireland is a unity. It's a cultural and historical unity. We've had a strictly political separation on this island for the last 96 years or so. But I'm confident that that political separation is not going to last. In fact, I even think that Brexit is very likely speeding up the process towards a united Ireland. That's a whole other topic, of course. My point is that Ireland has been this unity for hundreds, thousands of years, and this political separation that's existed for 96 years, I am confident will one day be seen as a small blip. And the underlying reality is Irish unity. The second thing that I'd say is that this Irish unity is mysteriously, even viscerally important to me. I think that's why the pain of this rupture in history has been really so hard for me. I'm mysteriously connected to Ireland in a way that I'm not to England. I'm just not. I mean, my blood is English. I mean, I will say my mother's maiden name was Keneally, and she had a paternal grandfather coming from County Galway, but basically my blood is English. So this connection that I feel to Ireland is very mysterious. Anyway, here I offer a montage of images, which I hope might give viewers a small sense of Ireland and the mysterious way she has penetrated me. Because I've lived here nearly 7 years now. And not only lived here, but by the grace of God, I've been able to travel the length and breadth of the land, absorbing the haunting beauty of her landscapes, also praying in countless chapels dotted across the country, and in the ancient ruins of her once great medieval abbeys, cathedrals, and churches, destroyed after the Reformation by the English soldiers of King Henry VIII and Oliver Cromwell. Of course, I've also taken in more modern aspects of Irish culture, walking the streets of her great cities, as well as listening, really trying to listen to her people. Along with this, I've spent many hours now studying 1600 years of Irish history, starting with St. Patrick, pictured here in an old Irish stamp, and the great saints who followed St. Patrick. Likewise, I've studied the lives of Irish political figures, including the great leaders of the 1916 Easter Rising, which led to Irish independence from the British Empire in 1922. Men like the mystic nationalist and poet Patrick Pearse, executed by the British, or the great Herein de Valera, who mysteriously escaped execution and eventually became president of the new Irish Republic. These men, amidst countless others, dreamed of an Ireland very different to England, and to an English society which was widely considered in Ireland at that time as excessively materialistic, capitalistic, and even godless. They included devout Catholics who wanted something different for Ireland, devout Catholics who were even willing to lay down their lives for that Ireland. The men and women of 1916 would be shocked, appalled, hurt to the core of their beings by what has happened to Ireland and what is now going to happen to a very sizable portion of Irish babies. However, as I say, I'm not Irish, and I like to take this opportunity to insert a truly Irish voice. It's the voice of a friend of mine who was expressing his pain as the Irish referendum results were becoming known. Now, my friend's name is Moyle Hocklin O'Kellick. He's an Irish author but he was actually writing more off the cuff. And this was posted at something called the Irish Conservatives Forum, which is something that I also participate in, and it's something that I'm going to get back to at the very end of the video for reasons that will become clearer. Right now, I just think that Mulholland expresses something very important here, and I'd like to read it to you. Since the scale of Ireland's vote for abortion became obvious on Friday, I've been gripped by various feelings. First of all, grief for all the lives that will be lost. I think this has to be the main consideration and outweigh everything else. It is like standing at the Vietnam Memorial and looking out at the rows and rows of names. You can't take it in. This can't just be another episode in the culture wars. It's far beyond that. Let's not trivialize it. Secondly, grief for my country. A pro-choice speaker, the day after the referendum, said, "Ireland is still the same place it was the day before." Yes, but we didn't realize how bad the situation was. It was beyond everyone's worst fears. A culture is far less important than a single human life, but I knew the culture. Almost everything I loved about the Ireland of my youth is dead, and that is a bitter draught. Mulholland goes on to say a little bit more that I'm not going to quote. Most of it is from an Irish nationalist perspective. By that I do not mean Sinn Féin, which it seems to me has really much more a globalist agenda than a nationalist agenda. I will quote one line though. He says, "Some people have been saying that they have no country now." It's very strange, friends. The heart is a mysterious thing. I've been saying that my blood is English, that my birth is American, but mysteriously I feel more that Ireland is my home than anywhere else. And the kind of pain, the kind of searing pain that's in this letter from Mulholland, where he says almost everything of the Ireland that he grew up in is dead, and that this is a bitter draught. I relate to this pain. I relate to this pain that countless people on this island are feeling now. And it seems to me that there are really these two pains that I'm going into in this video. There is the pain of the destruction of the culture, and there is the sheer horror of what this massacre means. And as I've asked myself, why am I quoting this from Mulholland? And I think I really respond to the fact that he has named the fact that human life is more important than culture, and that we must not forget that. And I find myself thinking that it's actually very important that he names that, sadly perhaps. And why is that? Because I find myself thinking that as horrified as I've been now by what's happening, I really, in terms of killing the unborn, I'm aware that I really could begin to sort of forget, to become blasé. I find myself thinking that the media is going to lull us all into forgetfulness. The media, of course, is never going to report this in the way it needs to be reported. Today in Dublin there were so many babies killed. The media's not going to be like that. The media will talk about massacres in other countries, and it might well be, down the road, I'm reading the Irish Times or something like that, looking at television, and I get really caught up in some terrible massacre that happens in another country. And all the while, I'm actually beginning to forget what's happening in this country day after day after day, or what I think will be happening day after day after day as we head down this slippery slope. And yeah, because abortion is it's a very silent form of massacre. The media isn't going to report it, as I say. And it's also a thing that obviously people are very silent about. It's like, if you get married or you have a baby, you throw a party. But nobody throws a party saying, hey, I just had an abortion, let's have a party. Despite the fact that people claim to be absolutely cool with the fact that they've had an abortion, I think it's evident that there is a terrible tragedy that people know in their hearts, a terrible shame, and they don't want to celebrate it, they don't want to expose it. So very often, if people are having abortions in this country, the only people who are going to know are the very closest to them. You'll know if it's, your sister maybe, or your girlfriend, or, your daughter maybe, but you won't know about this silent massacre that will be, in all likelihood, just going on day after day after day after day. And so somehow when I read Moyle Hochland's words, they somehow really spoke to me. We need, it's very much in our face now, what's happened, but we need to sort of really remember that this is just going to be an ongoing thing. And at the same time, even while he's making the point very well, I believe, that human life is more important than culture, there's another way that we have to realize that none of this would be possible without this, what I said earlier, what many people are seeing as the final destruction of Irish Catholic culture. None of this would be possible unless this culture was being murdered. And friends, I do believe it's being murdered. That's what I believe has been happening for decades now, and we're going to be talking about that a lot more in this video, and I think in future videos to come. I think the media is participating in an agenda to actually annihilate Catholic culture. But how do I say this? Yeah, the Irish Catholic culture was defending the life of the unborn, and it's very hard to separate the two. The two are totally intertwined, these two horrors. The horror that Moyle Hochland expresses about the destruction of his culture, the theft of his culture, the robbery of his culture, and the fact that this culture was a culture that protected life and also valued so much else of a noble and transcendent nature. Friends, it's the next morning after I recorded that last, and I've been very aware of how what I said is going to sound to certain people when I speak about the murder of a culture, the destruction of a culture, the theft of a culture, things like that. I'm aware that it's going to sound very excessive, it's going to sound simplistic, and I've been questioning myself about saying those things overnight. Because in a sense, it is simplistic. What I'm doing on a lot of these videos is speaking in broad strokes. Obviously, we're talking about a very complex phenomenon. We've seen this massive societal change. And I think it's legitimate to talk about death of a culture. All kinds of people feel that, and not just the Catholics that mourn that culture. There are plenty of people in Ireland who are saying good riddance to that culture. They're seeing that that culture has died. So then the question becomes, how did the culture die? Am I legitimate in any way speaking about murder? Did the culture just die of old age? Well, doesn't seem like that to me. after 1600 years of Irish Christianity. Maybe the culture made fatal mistakes, and that's what led to its demise. I won't deny that Catholic Ireland made mistakes, and later in this video I want to talk about some of the dark corners of Catholic Ireland. I want to own those and acknowledge those. But I think it's too simplistic to say that, again, after 1600 years of Christianity, that this culture simply died of some fatal mistakes. No, there's a very complex phenomenon here involving globalization, just the massive complexity of the modern world. But in the midst of all of that, I do think that there is and has been very, very, very deliberate ill will to Catholic culture in Ireland. I spoke about the media participating in an agenda to destroy Catholic Ireland. There's a thesis that I'm working with in this video. That thesis is that there has been this agenda of destruction going on in the media and in circles beyond the media. And it's very hard to know how to talk about this. Really, it's far more than I, at any rate, know how to unpack in a video like this. It seems to me that this topic that I'm speaking about, the annihilation of Catholic Ireland, deserves an entire book or several books. These books need to be written, and maybe I'm going to write one of them myself one of these days. And there's a part of me that wants to wait, I don't know, another 5-10 years before, so that I can write an extremely nuanced, balanced account of all of this. But I don't think now is the time for waiting. I think now, after this referendum result, I've got to take a real stab at this. And now we have something different. Something that may be abrupt or jarring, because sometimes stuff happens. Sometimes things don't go according to plan. And we have now a major deviation in terms of what I originally intended with this video. So you may have noticed that all along I've been dropping little pointers. I spoke about the importation of an alien ideology into Ireland. I spoke about the indoctrination of Ireland and said that I was going to get to that later. Or I mentioned my friend Moyle Houghlin at the Irish Conservatives Forum and said that I would come back to him as well by the end of the video. That's not going to happen now. And I want to try to explain. Friends, this video has been the most personal video that I've ever done. And it began, as I said, very much with my really feeling more affected by pain than any point in my life, with a political process. And I really didn't know whether I could speak. And I really had to struggle to find my voice. And in the course of struggling to find my voice, I also prayed a lot. I prayed, like, Lord, what do I really need to say here? And somehow in this process of struggling, this process of praying, shooting this video has taken on a life of its own. We've been speaking about a watershed for Ireland in Irish history, a profound reversal of 1600 years of Christianity, a rejection of 1600 years of Christianity. But in its own very, very minor way, I actually feel this time since the referendum, and maybe particularly the time struggling to make this video, has been something of a personal watershed for me. I'm finding that as I struggle and pray with these things, a lot of things are changing inside. And I'll be talking about that, I'm sure, in another video. But yeah, it's something existential. It's really brought me to the core or more to the core of what do I really believe, what do I really need to say, what do I need to do in my life. And in the midst of this, I found this video so hard. It's like I normally do these videos in a day or 2 days at most, but I found myself going day after day, shooting, reshooting again, thinking, is that really what I need to say? Is that right? Really searching myself. And in the course of that, I began accumulating loads and loads and loads of video footage. And I realized that not all that video footage can be incorporated in a single episode. So I'm going to take this sprawling mess of video footage and edit it into 2 videos. And in the next upcoming video, we'll really be focusing on the indoctrination of Ireland. But there'll be many other things to say as well with that, related to this personal and existential process that I'm in. I think some of my friends may really see in this video and in videos I think I'm going to shoot in the future that a certain radicalization is taking place in me. That's what it feels like to me. This process of struggle and prayer and the crisis and the tragedy that I see in Ireland is taking me in more radical directions than I've been able to go in before. And I imagine that some of that is definitely going to be reflected in the next video. And there's a lot I'm going to go into. I'm definitely going to get back to Moyle Houghlin and the Irish Conservatives Forum. I'm also going to invoke next video, another very dear friend of mine called Tracy Tucherone, who runs a forum and a site that I participate in called Fish Eaters, as well as a very fine set of resources regarding traditional Catholicism. All things are coming to me now in this watershed, in this radicalization, including the great Hilaire Belloc and the great G.K. Chesterton. Now, some people might be wondering, what has all this got to do with Irish babies being killed in their mother's wombs? I am going to suggest in the video that's to come that it really has rather more to do with that than might be initially apparent. Both Belloc and Chesterton were great friends of Ireland. They very much believed in the 1916 Easter Rising, which is another subject we're going to return to. And just like the leaders of the 1916 Easter Rising would be gutted if they saw what happened to Ireland today, would be horrified by what may well go on in time to develop into something like a fifth or a quarter, who knows, of Irish births being terminated, just like in Britain and the United States. Yeah, all these people I'm invoking, Belloc, Chesterton, the leaders of 1916, would be horrified beyond belief. And somehow I'm going to try to bring these kinds of threads together. That's for next time. Before I bring this video to a close, though, there's just one thing I want to clarify. And that is that as I've been looking through all the footage I've shot, I noticed how at the beginning of this video I spoke about collective pathologies. And I spoke about what's led to abortion in Ireland as a collective pathology. And I also spoke about Hitler's National Socialism, Stalinism and communist Russia as a collective pathology. Collective pathologies that came to an end. And it's occurring to me that perhaps if some people see this, they might be thinking, well, Roger, were you trying to call yes voters in the Irish referendum Nazis or Stalinists? And I need to say emphatically no. I had no such intention. I have no such intention. Nonetheless, I still think there's a collective pathology at work here. A terrible collective pathology. I find myself thinking too, to my youth as a New Ager. It seems to me that when I was a New Ager, I've spoken about this in my books and other videos, that I had fallen victim to a sort of sophisticated, a very sophisticated form of enchantment, bewitched. And I think, that actually happens to good people. And I wonder, or I tend to think that something analogous has happened to a lot of good Irish young people. That they've been bewitched, they've been enchanted by a sophisticated ideology, alien ideology, designed to ensnare them. So, no, I'm not calling yes voters Nazis or Stalinists, but I do very much take very seriously, obviously, this collective pathology that could lead in time to something like Britain, one-fifth of the Irish population, Irish babies, being killed. So very hard to find a way to speak about all these things, but we're going to keep going soon in the next episode. Just very final things to say, that if you like what I'm trying to do on this YouTube channel, I do appreciate people liking the videos and subscribing. And also, if you're interested in what I'm saying here about Ireland being invaded, then stay tuned for the next episode, which I'm going to call Abortion and the Indoctrination of Ireland.